morning. Thank you for being here. The pastor's away. It was an easy excuse to stay home and enjoy the long weekend, but you came anyway, so thank you for being here. I bring greetings from our Bishop, John Hopkins. I bring greetings from your district superintendent, Doug Lewis, whose family was here at the 8:30 service with us. I bring greetings from my wife, Karen, and her congregation, our congregation, at Ridgewood United Methodist Church in Parma. It truly is a blessing to be here, and I am thrilled to be here. I'm also thrilled and blessed to be living out a calling in the work that I do, because I truly, Don had mentioned that I consider my position to be a calling, and I truly do. I grew up in the church. I love the church. I love God. But I also have fun playing in media things, and working in the toy box of life in the sports department like I did, and then working in the news and being behind the scenes, as Don mentioned, getting all of the news and all the facts and all the statistics to give to the reporters and the anchors to put on TV. So to be able to take what I love in the church and to be able to take what I love about media and do it for a living is truly a blessing. I'm in my 6th year in this position, and I'm fortunate to be able to tell the stories of you and the stories of me and those of us who are out changing the world. That's what today's passage is about. Jesus called 70 people. There's more than 70 people here today. Think about this. Look around. 70 people. Jesus called 70 people, called them to him, blessed them, trusted them, and sent them out to let the world know that he was coming. We are called to do the same thing. Those individuals went out and worked on Jesus' behalf. And we do the same thing, going out and working on Jesus' behalf. And in my job, I get a chance to go out to churches. I get to go out and see individuals and ministries that are changing people's lives in the community. Through God, ordinary people like me and ordinary people like you are able to do extraordinary things. And we're here today on this Sunday, and we gather in churches around the world on Sundays to recharge our batteries, to gather with other Christians, to recharge our batteries from the week that was, and to prepare for the week that's to come. Because let's be honest, that's when church really happens. It's good that we're here together on Sundays, but church happens in the community. Church happens in our schools. It happens in our jobs. This world is not a fun place. It's not an easy place. It's not always a safe place. But we're blessed because the peaks and the valleys that we experience in our lives, because we're Christians, we know they're only temporary. We know that God has a greater purpose and that our life here on earth is short, but our life in eternity with Christ is our ultimate goal. You know, when we're out in that community and we're talking to people, nobody likes to feel vulnerable. Nobody likes to go up to complete strangers and bare our soul, giving our faith story, telling people about Christ, having no idea if the person looking at us is listening to us, if they're going to accept what we have to say, if they're going to reject what we have to say. But as Christians, that's our call, that's our duty, to go out into the world and to make disciples. And to do that, we have to make ourselves vulnerable. And I'll be the first to admit that I, too often in my life, have taken the path of least resistance, because it was the path of least resistance. It was a lot easier than making myself feel vulnerable. But being a Christian isn't about taking the safe and the easy way out. Being crucified on the cross was not the safe play. Either was overturning the tables in the temple, feeding the multitudes, or walking on water. Jesus was fully committed to God's work, and he asks the same for each of us. Our theme at annual conference last month was Jesus is calling us out. And our key word was transform. We're being called out into the world, outside the walls of our sanctuary, outside the walls of our safe haven, to go into the community, to make ourselves vulnerable, to share our faith story, to tell people about Jesus Christ, and to transform lives, our lives and their lives. So the question I have for you this morning is, what are people in Norwalk saying about Norwalk First United Methodist Church? What are they saying about you? What are they saying about this congregation? Don mentioned that Karen and I have 2 children. Brady is our adult son, and Bethany is our rapidly growing adult daughter who just graduated from high school and will be going off to Bowling Green in the fall. And it's hard to believe that we're approaching empty nest. There are days I'm looking forward to it and days that I'm not looking forward to it. But when we can, we like to get away for vacation. Between their schedules, my schedule, Karen's schedule, it's not always easy. And when we go, we like to go down to Dewey Beach in Delaware and just hang out on the beach and veg for a while. And if you're not familiar with Dewey Beach, it's the beach that's just south of Rehoboth Beach, right in the middle of Delaware, and just north of Bethany Beach, and our daughter's name is Bethany, so she loves Bethany Beach, and we have all of the paraphernalia to prove it. So when we go to Dewey Beach, we go up to Rehoboth and walk the boardwalk. And we were there a few years ago, and we found a bookstore that hadn't been there the last time we were there, and it was a Christian bookstore called the Mustard Seed. And so we walk into the store. It's a little bookstore. There's one person in the store. It's the woman who's running the place. So it's the woman behind the counter, it's Karen, myself, and Bethany. And this was the entire conversation. We walked in, the woman said hello, we said hello. We must have said it wrong because she said, "Oh, where are you from?" So we explained that we were from Cleveland, or just outside of Cleveland in Ohio, and the very next words out of her mouth were, "Well, while you're in town, you have to go to my church." She didn't know I worked for the church. She didn't know Karen was the pastor. Didn't matter. She saw people who were visitors to her town, and she said, "You have to go to my church." And then she continued, "Well, it's not really my church. I'm Catholic. But the church I go to is Epworth United Methodist Church." And we said, well, why do you go to Epworth United Methodist Church? And she proceeded to ramble off a long list of why we go, starting with, it's the best place in town, it's the happening place, everybody knows that. We've got music throughout the week. We've got groups that meet all the time, the Boys Club, the Girls Club, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts. We've got a skate park in the back. We've got daycare. We've got this. We've got the... You have to go to my church. What are people saying in Norwalk about Norwalk First United Methodist Church? What are you saying in Norwalk about Norwalk First United Methodist Church? And this woman went on and on and on and on, and I politely said, this was on a Wednesday, I said, "Unfortunately, we're leaving town on Saturday to go back home, so we won't be here on Sunday," to which she said, "Well, that's okay, you still have to go to my church. There's something going on every day." And so we bought our things and we walked out of the store, and I looked at Karen and I said, "You know where we're going, right?" And she said, "Of course." So we went and we found Epworth United Methodist Church on a very rainy Wednesday night, and the place was hopping, and there was lots going on. What are people saying about Norwalk First United Methodist Church? You see, this congregation is one of 734 congregations in the East Ohio Conference of the United Methodist Church. 734 churches in our conference. We have 12 million plus people worldwide who proclaim their faith as United Methodist. Our annual conference is one of 57 annual conferences across this country. There's another 76 annual conferences around the world, in Europe, in Africa, in the Philippines. We are a worldwide denomination, and we do incredible things together than any of us could do as individual congregations. Our East Ohio Conference supports ministries here at home and ministries around the world. And one of those ministries that we support internationally is we've called it the 3 C's: churches, clinics, and classrooms. You may have heard about it before. East Ohio Conference, your congregation and the 733 others support churches, clinics, and classrooms in Liberia and Sierra Leone, West Africa, in Zimbabwe, and in Russia. And in 2013, I was blessed to have the opportunity to travel with Bishop Hopkins and a couple of members of Cabinet, and we spent 16 days visiting our churches, our clinics, and our classrooms in Liberia and Sierra Leone. We attended the Sierra Leone annual conference for 3 days, which was a really cool experience. And while we were in those countries, we stood in those classrooms, we stood in those clinics, we stood in those churches. We walked miles into the village, and that was miles with an S on the end, miles into the jungle to visit the villages on the same paths that the children walk miles to and from school every day. We saw radical hospitality like I have never experienced in this country. We all know that we have way too much. But to see the way people were living in Liberia and Sierra Leone and to walk into their villages unannounced and have them offer what little they have as a sign of hospitality, of thank you for coming and visiting us, thank you for ministering to us, was beyond anything that I've ever experienced. We stood in one school that's supported here by the East Ohio Conference that had 55 students in it. It was a little small hut with a thatch roof and 55 students hungry for knowledge, made possible in part because of our contributions from the East Ohio Conference of the United Methodist Church. Sadly, a year after we were there, Ebola struck. And you heard about Ebola and the thousands and thousands of people who died as a result of Ebola. Those clinics that we stood in were closed. Some of the people that we met died. Now, while we were there, you could buy a 100-pound bag of rice. Rice is a staple diet. A 100-pound bag of rice for $35. And that 100-pound bag fed a family of 4 for a month. Well, when Ebola hit, because it spread through a contact, businesses closed, schools closed, churches closed. Churches were told not to hold services because they didn't want groups of people coming together. And so people stayed at home, they stayed in their villages. Because the businesses were closed, the economy started going down. Business owners trying to make any money figured the one thing people had to buy was food. And they needed to make up some money from what they weren't selling, so they raised the price of food. That 100-pound bag of rice that cost $35 in 2013 became $70 when Ebola struck. Now, if you have little money to begin with, and you're not working, and you had a hard time affording $35, there's no way you're going to afford a $70 bag of rice. And so people starved, and almost as many people died of starvation as died from Ebola, and that news didn't get spread too much. So in October of 2014, I received a telephone call from Kathy DeCreedy, who at that time was assigned to the Mentor United Methodist Church on a part-time basis as a pastor, and she was also assigned part-time as our missionary in Liberia. She called and she said, Rick, one of my parishioners who had just returned from Africa not too long ago, right before Ebola, said, I'd like to start a rice bucket challenge. Now, we've heard about the ice bucket challenge, $100 million raised for ALS. People, you give $100, you have to pour ice water on your head, right? This woman said, what if we do a rice bucket challenge? Now, we're not going to pour rice on anybody, but what if we raise $70 at a time to buy a bag of rice? And so I said, hey, I think that's a really cool idea, but I think it's more than just a local church idea. I think it's a much wider, I have your permission to spread this around our conference? And they agreed, and so within 24 hours, we launched the Rice Bucket Challenge on the conference website, sent e-blasts out to all the pastors, put it in the e-news, put it in newsletters, and got the word out there. Now, when Kathy had called me, I happened to be in Savannah, Georgia at the time. I'm on the board of the United Methodist Association of Communicators, and so I was with people who do my job for living across the country. So an hour after we launched on the website, I went into a meeting and I said, hey, by the way, guys, this is what we're doing in East Ohio. And I explained what the Rice Bucket Challenge was, showed them the link on our website. I returned home. Right around Thanksgiving time, I received a telephone call. And I answered the call, and it's a woman at First United Methodist Church in Odessa, Texas. And she said, are you still collecting for the Rice Bucket Challenge? And I said, we are? Can I ask how you heard about us? Oh yeah, a friend of mine in New Mexico heard about it, and so she told me. So I quick pull up the New Mexico Conference website, and there's all the information that we'd put together, the photos, the graphics, everything. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I said, yes, we are. And she was thrilled. She said, okay, you'll hear from us. Now, when we launched this campaign, we raised tens of thousands of dollars in East Ohio from generous contributions from congregations and individuals around the conference that we were able to do great works with. Shortly before Christmas, I received an envelope in the mail from First United Methodist Church in Odessa, Texas. And in the envelope was a check for $30,000. That's what I said. $30,000. So I quickly called the pastor and thanked the pastor and said, why? Thank you, first of all, but why? And he said, oh, we're blessed here at First Church. He said, again, this year we raised more money than our capital campaign needed, because that happens all the time in the church, right? And he said, and we want to be good stewards of our money. We don't want it sitting in a bank. We want it doing good work. That's why people gave it to us. And so last year we gave $30,000 to Imagine No Malaria, and we looked at a number of different ministries that were being done, and we want ministries that have boots on the ground. and we chose your ministry, and thank you for that. Well, I thanked him, and I told him, we too wanted to be good stewards with our money, and so because of that, we didn't want to buy the rice here and ship it, because then you have to pay shipping costs and all that other kind of stuff. So we had agreed when we collected the money that we would send it to the district superintendents. We had worked this out with Bishop Innes. We would send the money to the district superintendents. They could get more bang for their buck. They could buy more rice, and the money would stimulate their local economy. And then the district superintendents would distribute the rice to their parishioners so that we made sure that it got into the homes and the families that desperately needed it. We're transforming lives. You and me, we're transforming lives. In May, I spent 2 weeks at General Conference. General Conference, if you're not aware, is our every 4-year business meeting. It's the official language. Whatever happens at General Conference is the official stance of the United Methodist Church for the next 4 years. So we talk about a lot of issues. 864 delegates from around the world represent their conferences and their individual churches. And my camera got me a front row seat to all kinds of passionate worship, wonderful fellowship, spirited debate, sometimes happy debate, sometimes not so happy debate, but everybody having a chance to have their say. And part of what we do at General Conference is we set the budget for the next 4 years. And out of that budget, then, each conference is given its own, what's called an apportionment. Each conference has said, okay, in order to support this budget for the worldwide church for the next 4 years, East Ohio, this is the money that you're responsible for contributing on a yearly basis. Indiana, this is what you're responsible for contributing. Cal, Nevada, this is what you're responsible for contributing. Bishop Hopkins is very big on paying apportionments, and we have paid our conference apportionments each year for the past 10 years. We are transforming lives with the work that we do. Now, last month we had annual conference. An annual conference is our yearly business meeting for the 734 churches here in East Ohio. And again, we had wonderful worship, great fellowship, times to connect with one another. Part of our annual conference is our youth annual conference, and it's awesome to see our youth. We're one of the few conferences in this country that have a youth annual conference, and it's awesome to see the work that the youth do, also with passionate worship, wonderful fellowship, and paying attention to social needs and social issues and having those conversations. We're blessed here in East Ohio. And part of what we do in those business meetings is we set our budget for the East Ohio Conference. And we say, okay, this is what we have to pay for the general church. This is what it's going to cost to run our conference. And our apportionments are based on what each, and then from our apportionment, we assign each 734 churches their apportionment. Okay, so this is what the church runs on. This is our contribution to it. This is what the conference runs. Here's each individual church's contribution to it. And your apportionment is determined based upon the money that each individual church spends on its programming, on its operations, and on its staff. So you take those three figures. Membership is no longer included in the equation. You take programming, operations, and staff, whatever that totals up to, a percentage of that then determines what each church pays in its apportionments. Thank you, Norwalk First United Methodist Church, for faithfully paying your apportionments 100%. It's a thank you from me. It's a thank you from Doug Lewis. It's a thank you from Bishop Hopkins. You are transforming lives, not only here, but across the country and around the world by paying your apportionments. And thank you for doing that. Now, did you ever wonder why they were called apportionments? Say yes, because I'm going to go on anyways. They're apportionments because they're shared. When you contribute money in your offering, which we'll be doing here shortly, some of it stays here, and some of it goes to East Ohio to support wonderful ministries like our camps, Camp Asbury, Camp Aldersgate, to Camp Wanakee, which is where children go and sometimes for the first time experience God, and where they develop their faith walk and they develop their friendships that last a lifetime. 1 week of camp is an equivalent of a year of Sunday school, just because of the amount of time that people are together in Christian education, Christian love, and Christian fellowship. When you give your money to Norwalk First United Methodist Church, not only helps the camps, it pays for staffing positions like myself. I have a job because of you, so thank you. Health and welfare agencies like Flat Rock and Ohio Guidestone, our 5 United Methodist colleges, our seminaries, It's all because of the apportionments that each of our churches pay. When you pay or put money in the offering plate, some of it stays here, and some of it goes across the country to support the ministries that are taking place across the country, because of seminaries that we support around the world, because of colleges across the country, and colleges that we support across the country. When you pay your apportionments and your offerings, some of it stays here, and some of it goes around the world. We have 1,000 missionaries around the world, doing more than 9,000 mission projects, not only in the United States, but also 165 different countries. We were given gifts from God's grace, and when we give from those gifts, we are blessing others. We are transforming lives. We are stepping outside of the comfort zone of our sanctuary, and we are making a difference. In a week, I'll be traveling to Peoria for jurisdictional conference. That's the other element. We have the general church, we have the annual conferences, and in between is the jurisdictional conference. We here in East Ohio are part of what's called the North Central Jurisdiction. There are 5 geographical regions in the country. Our North Central Jurisdiction is all of the churches in Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. There are 9 bishops that preside over those areas. And at jurisdictional conference, we elect people to serve on jurisdictional committees, but more importantly, we elect bishops. And we have, of our 9 bishops, 4 are retiring this year, including Bishop Hopkins, who retires at the end of August. And so the delegates who are elected at annual conferences to represent our conference at general conference and a jurisdictional conference will be electing our new bishops. East Ohio is making a difference and is known around this denomination. We had a great presence at general conference, both on stage and behind the scenes, and the same thing will happen at jurisdictional conference. There are a total of 17 candidates who have been endorsed as Episcopal candidates, so 4 of those 17 are going to be elected bishop. 3 of those 17 are from East Ohio. Gary George, who is our assistant to the bishop, was endorsed at annual conference as our official candidate for the bishop. And also Susan Brown and Armando Arellano are 2 other pastors from East Ohio who have put their hat into the ring and have been endorsed by different agencies as Episcopal candidates. We are making a difference. Jesus called 70 people, blessed them, trusted them, and sent them out. We have been called. We have been trusted. We have been blessed to leave our comfort zones and to go out into the world to transform it in new places. When we pulled into Epworth United Methodist Church in Rehoboth Beach, there was a sign at the entrance to the driveway that said, "Welcome all who enter." And as we left the church that evening, on the back of that sign said this: "Entering the mission field." That's where church happens. That's where lives are changed, when we enter the mission field. We are followers of Jesus Christ who gather here on Sundays to worship together and to grow in our faith. Our real work begins when we leave this building. When you leave this building this morning, remember that you are entering the mission field. Together, you and me, we carry our mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ into the world for the transformation of the world. Norwalk First is part of a connection of congregations that brings the love of Christ to others here and around the world. We are United Methodists. We are ordinary people who, because of God, can do extraordinary things. And because of that, we are blessed.